welcome in. I'm the Kodiak, and today I'm going to scoot a little closer to my microphone, and I am here to talk about every team's over-under going into the 2024 season, whether or not I think they'll hit it. And yeah, so overall, just a few ground rules to address. So these lines are as of August 3rd, 2024, 4:08 a.m. Pacific time, and these lines are taken from the Durango Casino and Sportsbook. That's 5 minutes away from my apartment complex. And there's one injury so far that I think really affects things, but there could be more closer to the season. And there haven't been any trades yet. So Ayuk and Higgins is probably going to stay, but Judon also has not been moved. Those are two guys that have been, Ayuk and Judon at least, that have been very heavily rumored to be on the move going forward into the season. But this is not just me guessing. This is not me just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks. I genuinely went through game by game and predicted every contest for the next 18 weeks of the NFL season. And there's a website where you can do that. Just literally type in Google NFL Playoff Predictor, and it's pretty easy to find. So yeah, if you want to do that for yourself, that would be pretty cool. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Let me know if you have any video ideas as well, because, in this time of year, there's only so much I can do as far as content, because we haven't even had any preseason games yet. But, yeah, so let's get right into it. So with the Chargers, we're going to go under at the 8.5. This is a team that I really saw myself getting excited about this offseason, and I was just like, okay, people every offseason, they get excited about the Chargers. They think that the Chargers are finally going to make waves in the division. They're finally going to make waves in the AFC. And for some reason, they just always ended up charging, and it never came to fruition. But here's the deal. Justin Herbert has plantar fasciitis. So their season, anything you want to talk about, them potentially reaching the playoffs, reaching, maybe even further than that, it's done. Because Herbert, he has plantar fasciitis, and that is not an injury that heals up quickly. Not even a little bit. Like, even if he comes back, his timetable was 2 to 4 weeks, but even if he goes 2 to 4 weeks, look at 2015 Peyton Manning. He got plantar fasciitis in training camp, and he went from kind of being on a decline to hitting rock bottom. So their season's over. It reminds me very, very, very eerily of Burrow last year, where he got hurt in training camp, and then for whatever reason, they just decided to, not throw Jake Browning out there. They were just like, okay, Burrow, you at 10% is better than anything else we have. So Burrow goes out there, sucks for the first 5 weeks, comes back, plays well, wrist blows up, you know the story. And I would still have faith in this team if they had a genuine backup. I would have faith if they had a guy that I could look at and just be like, okay, he could maybe win, if Herbert goes out for 4 weeks, he could maybe win 2 games, but they don't have that in Easton Stick. He was very awful last year, and unless Max Duggan can find his way onto the field instead of Easton Stick, I'm just not optimistic about this whatsoever. And Jesse Minter is a great upgrade at defensive coordinator, but the team still lacks talent. You do have Bosa and Mack, two guys that have kind of tapered off over the past few years. I mean, Mack is still playing at a higher level than Bosa at least, but Bosa just can't stay on the field. You still have Derwin James, who kind of had a lackluster year. And overall, there are just a few guys that I expect to take steps up now that Staley is not running the defense. And just what it boils down to, I would still believe in this offense if they had a good running back tandem, if they had good wide receivers, but they have neither of those. Like, they have Kamani Vidal and Ladd McConkey, and that's pretty much it. So you're basically relying on 2 rookies to carry the lion's share of the skill position work. And overall, it's just not going to work out year one in the Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman era in LA. With the Broncos, 5.5, I'm going to go with the over here, and here's why. Sean Payton did an incredible job last year. The roster had no talent besides Patrick Surtain, Quinn Miners, and Justin Simmons, and it was a very limited team as far as what they could do because Russell Wilson was their quarterback last year. And Payton is just way too good of a coach for this team to only win 5 games. What I've realized about Sean Payton is that there are going to be some games you lose that you never, ever should have lost. Think about with the Saints 2018 Week 1 against Tampa Bay. Like, that Fitzmagic game. That's one thing that I can point to and just be like, there was no reason for that team to lose that game. But last year against the Chiefs in the middle of the year. There was no reason for the Broncos to win that game, and guess what? They did by multiple scores. So, yeah, Peyton, he's way too good of a coach to have this team only win 5 games. He raises the floor of this team. Hardcore is what I'm saying. But why the line is set so low is because there's a lot of uncertainty. It's very valid to question, the roster talent. It's very valid to question the quarterback situation. And if Nick's is bad, this team genuinely does have a low floor. 2, 3, 4 wins are not out of the question. But this is a full offseason of largely the same coaching staff. They had a good 2023 coaching staff-wise. Like, even Vance Joseph, I was really impressed at how he was able to turn it around from, allowing 70 points to being a defense that played so aggressive and generated so many takeaways and went for the ball on every play, especially with, not having that great of personnel. But, yeah, so with them, I will go with the over. I'm not expecting this team to be world beaters or anything, but I think we will go over here. One team I actually do have genuine expectations for are the Raiders. So they have question marks, but it's overall a good offensive unit besides the quarterbacks and running backs. You do have a good offensive line, especially with Colton Miller anchoring it. And, you could get high-level play from Aiden O'Connell and or Gardner Minshew. They've shown it before, or at least Minshew has shown a propensity to at least be competent in the NFL. AOC is the real wild card here. Ended the year last year, but so did he ended the year good last year, but so did all the Raiders. One thing that does really concern me is their running back room, because you have Zamir White and what else? Dylan Labe from New Hampshire. Alexander Madison, total joke. So the defense played incredible under Pierce. And this team played like they were Raiders again. And you guys know what I mean. When the Las Vegas Raiders moved to Las Vegas, I remember saying that it felt like the identity of the team had been sucked out because nobody here cheers for the Raiders. Like, okay, that's a lie. They probably still are the most popular team, but I would say only 25% of people who actually follow the NFL here have a vested interest in the Raiders. And with this team, I think the identity of them being like the bad people, like the misfits of the NFL, I think it's coming back. And I'm expecting this team to continue their hot streak into next year. They ended the year very, very tough, and ultimately that's where I think we're going to go heading into next year for the Raiders. So Chiefs 11.5 and over here. So the reason they only won 11 games last year was because they had nothing at the wide receiver position. And the offense was meh at best last year. It still wasn't that good in the playoffs, but, the defense was really what took them over and what propelled them. But the defense did lose Jarius Sneed, but they're really good at replacing talent. They always are ensuring that they have a guy up when it is time for their high-end talent to seek contracts elsewhere. But ultimately, I think last year is about as bad as it's going to get, at least in the regular season, for the Kansas City Chiefs, because you had multiple receivers outright losing you the game because of how bad they were. And sure, Kelsey is on borrowed time, but this is another team that should be, once again, very cohesive and very good. So the Bengals, we're going with the over. 10.5, we're going over on that one. So healthy Burrow will take this team a long way. And if the O-line is cohesive, you do not need to underestimate what this team can do. Because Burrow, with a functioning O-line, we've seen where he can go. He can go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, and he can win an Arrowhead. Like, that is genuinely what he can do. And it took an O-line thrown together by absolute duct tape for the Chiefs to beat him in the AFC Championship. So I think that when it is time for the Bengals to, be fully healthy and finally take that next step, I think they can do it. I genuinely think they can do it. 2023 was kind of a lost year because of Burrow's calf injury, but you never underestimate the ability and stability with a good coaching staff in place. So you have Taylor and Lou back there again. Now, one concern I do have about them is their pass defense, because apparently nobody fighting for the cornerback 2 spot is doing that good of a job in training camp. And the safety play also is a concern, but last year is about as bad as it's going to get for the Cincinnati Bengals, and you did add Stone in free agency, so we'll see where that goes there. But and I do really like Stone. So yeah. Now with the Browns 8.5, I'm actually going to go under here, and here's why. So the pass rush really tapered off at the end of 2023. Myles Garrett in particular his production, I think he only got like 1 sack in the past like 5 or 6 games or so. And I just don't know if this team has a realistic path to good and competent quarterback play anytime soon. Because yes, Deshaun Watson, he could end up getting better, but he has missed a lot of time over the past few years to the point where I'm pretty sure he has not played more games than he has played. So the defense should carry. It's one of the game's best. You have a great secondary. You do have a great unit there. But there's just too many questions here for the offense in general. The run game has no upside. Chubb is lucky to still be walking. And the running back room behind Chubb last year played like an absolute joke. Like I was not very impressed with their ground game at all when Chubb did go down. Yeah, Ford, he could catch passes, but that was about it. He was running for like 3.6 yards per carry. Either way, just I question this team's ceiling because I don't think their offense is going to be very good. Stefanski, good coach, but offense next year, not expecting big things. Hold on, let me put on my chapstick. All right. So with the Ravens, once again, I actually don't think they're going to win the division this time around. I think that's going to go to the Bengals, but they blew their best shot at a Super Bowl last year with Lamar. But this team is still going to be a good team again. They lost 3 starting offensive linemen in free agency as well as Queen. They lost Zeitler, they lost Simpson, and they did lose Patrick Queen, who was a steady presence in the middle of the defense. Obviously, you still have Roquan, you still have Hamilton, you still have a lot of those guys. So, yeah, but you did lose Mike McDonald to Seattle. So one of the bets that I've seen a lot of people make in underdog drafts is a lot of people are betting that the Ravens defense regresses significantly without Mike McDonald. I don't think it's going to regress significantly without him, but undoubtedly that does hurt because he was an absolute mastermind and did a great job last year at calling the defense and running the defense. But you have Lamar Jackson with Derrick Henry running next to him. And so just for that alone, I don't really need to see much more from this Baltimore Ravens team, at least on their roster, and just be like, okay, they're going to hit their over. And also, you're throwing to Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman. I mean, maybe Rashad Bateman is a non-factor in that, but Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. So that's a pretty dang good tandem of weapons. And honestly, with the Ravens scheme, you only need a handful of people who are competent. But yeah, I think the Ravens go over. And I also think the Steelers go over. So Tomlin, he will always have this team playing above 500. It doesn't matter if the roster's bad. It doesn't matter if the coordinators are bad. It doesn't matter if the quarterback is literally, a Walmart cashier. Mike Tomlin is going to get this team above 500. It's just what's going to happen. It's a law in the NFL, and that's one of the most meaningless but also most impressive feats in the NFL, that the Steelers have not had a losing season in however long. But Arthur Smith was an interesting hire, but I could see it working out. I could see Mike Tomlin just being like, okay, Arthur Smith, these are the guys we're going to use. We have great players. We have Jalen Warren. We have George Pickens. We're going to use these guys. We're not just going to do end-around jet sweeps in the red zone. And Arthur Smith is probably going to be like, okay, yeah. I don't see him having enough of an ego now that he doesn't have, 3 guys he drafted in the top 10 at running back, wide receiver, and tight end, just for him to make a point again and just be like, haha, look at me not using these guys, fantasy football players. And ultimately, the run game, it should be good. Najee Harris is very inefficient, but never underestimate the idea of an innings eater. You know how they have innings eater relievers in baseball? That's kind of what Najee Harris is at running back. You know that he's not going to rip off like a 50-yard run, but he is a steady presence. Now, one guy who could rip off a 50-yard run and genuinely is a top 10 running back in the sport is Jalen Warren, but I do have questions about their passing attack because Russell Wilson is now going to be their starter in week 1, most likely, and he cannot do anything over the middle of the field. So Freiermuth, he needs to be kind of rid of the equation here. And Pickens, he's a guy who, Russell Wilson, he can hit him down the boundary, and it's going to just look awesome. There's going to be a few great connections there. He's going to play the Courtland Sutton role in this offense, but the defense will be good again. But this unit and team in general is miserable without TJ Watt. I think they've only won like 1 or 2 games every time TJ Watt has missed a game over the past few years. So yeah, they don't have a decent floor at all. Yeah, despite what you want to believe. But ultimately, I just think that, Tomlin, he just always does a great job of making do with what he has. So 9.5. I was really surprised that the sportsbook only had this at 9.5, but I'm going to go over on this one. They did it last year, and this is another year with D'Amico Ryans and Slowick. So I don't have any reason to believe that they were going to go under that. But I understand the hesitancy on small sample sizes, but C.J. Stroud is insane. And C.J. Stroud is legitimately a top 5-6 quarterback in the NFL. So now you pair him up with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and you just added Stephon Diggs, who isn't what he once was, but he'll be a steady veteran presence. And, you do have other guys there like Schultz, and you do have an innings eater at running back in Joe Mixon. So ultimately, the O-line and run game should be a lot more cohesive, because I know it was an adjustment for Houston last year to run Slowick's scheme. And I think one thing that would be great is if Dameon Pierce was able to show the ability that he flashed his rookie year once again. And the defense is strong up front, but the secondary besides Stingley is shaky. It's a bunch of guys who were former top 10 picks or just random late round guys. But with a tandem of, I believe, who did they add in this offseason? Did they add Danielle Hunter? I can't remember where Danielle Hunter went, but let's just assume he went to the Texans. I might look like a fool after this. But then you pair him with Will Anderson, and ultimately up front the defense is going to look very good. And ultimately there's not a lot to dislike about this team. I'm very excited for them going forward because it's been a rocky road. You paid Deshaun, you made the wild card round. So what happened first? They made the divisional round against Kansas City. They blew a 24-0 lead. Then they paid Deshaun Watson. Then they sucked. And then Deshaun Watson had all those allegations. And they traded 2 first-round picks to Miami. Yeah. So, yeah, either way, it's been a rocky road for Houston because they were miserable in 2022. And then they got C.J. Stroud. So, yeah, I'm happy for them. So, Jaguars 8.5. I'm going to go under here. I just don't see how this team got better at all, particularly in the secondary when you lose guys like Williams, and just in general, I just don't see how this team's roster ended up improving. They were always listed whenever I was reading those like off-season winners and losers articles. They were always listed as a loser. So once again, I just don't see how they got better. Now they did add Brian Thomas Jr. and Brian Thomas Jr. is somebody I really liked. He's an absolute dog coming over from LSU, and I think he's going to play a very good role in the Jaguars receiving game. You did lose Calvin Ridley, but for whatever reason, Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley just couldn't get on the same page last year. And last year, they finished with a 9-8 record, but ultimately, they had to have a lot go right the past 2 years, and they only finished with a 9-8 record in both of those years. Last year, you started 8-3, but the defense absolutely crumbled. And just in general, I'm just not that high on this team as compared to the national media. Now, Doug Peterson, he completely wants to ruin his career just for the sake of Press Taylor being an offensive coordinator, and I don't know why he keeps doing it, but you need your young guys to step up when the Jaguars are now going through a phase that they've gone through where, okay, we had some guys leaving free agency. Now we need some young guys to step up, especially because Trevor Lawrence, his extension is going to kick in sometime within the next 2 years, so it would be very beneficial for those guys to step up as well. So Colts 9-8 last year, and with an 8.5 line, we're going with the over. And with a lot of these people, with a lot of these ideas, and you look at the 2023 record, a lot of people are just like, well, they finished blah blah. Like with the Jaguars, you could just be like, well, they finished 9-8 last year, and that was with Trevor Lawrence, missing a lot of the year, and that was with, all this stuff happened. On the converse, the counter argument to stuff like that is, they had a lot of things go their way, and what's another team I can use, for example? Another team I can use as an example is the Rams. Or, spoiler alert, the Rams are a team that I'm going to have hitting the under. I can see a Rams fan in my comment section now being like, okay, we went 10-7 last year with a bad team. Now we added Verse, now we added Fisk, and all that stuff is valid, but once again, just because something happened last year, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen this year. And I know that's kind of like a no-duh sort of thing, but with the Indianapolis Colts in particular, I just don't see how this team regresses record-wise because Gardner Minshew was their quarterback for 11 or 12 games last year, and they still went 9-8. They still had finished above 500. So if that's their floor with their line with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, imagine what they can do with Anthony Richardson. And Steichen is one of the best run schemers I can think about. And just in general, a full season of Anthony Richardson means that this line's over, becomes free money. But what I will say, a full season of Anthony Richardson, it's something that would make me really, really uneasy to bank on. So this line would not be something that I'd actively throw money on because Anthony Richardson's play style is violent, like very violent. And the secondary for this team is really bad. So they don't have a great ceiling compared to the other teams. And they do kind of have a thin margin for error. Like, I can only see this team really winning 9 or 10 games. But yeah, the secondary, once again, I'm expecting another tough year from them. I understand the cupboards were pretty bare last year due to injuries and suspensions and all that, but it remains to be seen how good they're actually going to be. So, under 6.5 for the Tennessee Titans. So, if you believe in Will Levis, you are going to hit the over here. If you don't believe in Will Levis, you're going to hit the under here. And I just happen to not believe in Will Levis. I think he's just way too irresponsible to actually play quarterback in the NFL. And I just see him more of a diet Jameis Winston type where he's going to contribute significantly to the team's loss record. And you're getting a lot of good, but you're getting way more bad. And I don't like Will Levis. I just think that Rand Carthon as a GM is pretty good. And ultimately, I'm just not a fan of Levis. I think he has way too many turnover-worthy plays. I don't think he can deal with pressure very well. That's just what I've seen from last year. Now, I won't discredit the fact that he could take steps forward. Like, not even a little bit. Like, he could very well be a good quarterback this year and, make me eat crow. But there are still some questions about the skill position dudes despite the investments. Calvin Ridley is somebody who they paid a bag to last year. And once again, he couldn't really find a lot of chemistry with Trevor Lawrence, so now he's going into a new offense, and now he's a year older. And I just have some questions about the skill position room. Is Tony Pollard going to be the same guy? DeAndre Hopkins missing 4 to 6 weeks, probably not going to be fully healthy. Definitely not going to be fully healthy to start the year. So the defense, they should be better with the new additions, but especially with Sweat, especially with Wouzier, especially with a few other guys. But the division is really, really tough. So there's a lot of things that you can look at this Titans roster and be like, okay, I genuinely enjoy it. I genuinely think that this team could be very good, especially now that they don't have Vrabel and they have Callahan as well. But yeah, this division's just really, really tough. The D-line is the strength of this team, and that's pretty good. That bodes pretty well for them in the AFC South contest. But yeah. So with the Buffalo Bills, we are going to hit the over here too. And a lot went wrong for them last season, but they still won the AFC East. So that says a lot about the team. That's a huge testament to McDermott, huge testament to Josh Allen as well. And as long as they take care of business during the divisional games, they'll be good. New England still in for another year of a young core. So I expect the Bills to sweep, even though the Bills lost last year in New England, which was really disappointing for them. But they should take care of the Jets again. Once again, humiliating loss to the Jets last year in Week 1 to Zach Wilson. But as long as they take care of business against the Dolphins, which I expect them to, they'll hit this. And McDermott could end up blowing it, though, because the game of the year is always the Bills losing somehow. And, if the Bills are in a shootout that gets really tough and requires a lot of perseverance and adversity, the other team is going to win. So hopefully they don't get into a lot of those. But Josh Allen, he will carry, even though they just cut a bunch of people who are aging veterans. And, that's just one of the things that happens when you're a cap casualty in the NFL. I expect Josh Allen to do very well. He's now going to be without Stephon Diggs, but I think that was addition by subtraction, all things considered. So with the Dolphins, 9.5, I'm actually going under. I think I had them finishing at 9-8. And a lot of them went right for them last season, and they still didn't win the AFC East. So that says a lot about the mental toughness and mental fortitude of this team. And the Achane, Mostert, and Wright rushing attack, it's going to be great. It's going to be very efficient. It's going to be look unstoppable at certain points this year. Some poor team is going to go into Miami in September, October, and they're just going to get their doors blown off of them. And I'm not going to discount that at all. But when this team needs to go on the road and when this team needs to play in a high-level game, they don't win those sorts of contests typically under the Tua Tagovailoa era in Miami. So bad road record, bad important game record really does not bode well for me thinking that they're going to go over 9.5 wins. But the front seven, it's going through a lot of turnover and uncertainty because you do have Chubb and Phillips, both who had ACL injuries. So Chop Robinson, he's going to need to step up, especially because those guys both had season-ending injuries last year. And now you did lose Vic Fangio, but honestly, I wasn't really impressed with the job Vic Fangio did with his Dolphins defense. But yeah, looking at their schedule, they got some tough games this year. They have the 49ers late, they have the Texans late, and a few others. So they have a really tough schedule late in the year. And as I mentioned, Tua just can't do it. Now, with the Jets, 9.5, we're going with the under. And this is one thing that people just need to people need to take a look in the mirror and be like, I'm just like, are you serious? So why is the over favored? The over is like minus 160. Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh have never had a winning season. And I'm just like, did you guys not watch this team last year? So you're getting 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers with coming off an Achilles injury, with the worst coaching staff in football, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And I hate to say it, but Rodgers is not good anymore. He was bad at the end of 2022, and he's coming off an Achilles tear. So he hasn't played real football in, it's going to be 20 months by the time week 1 rolls around, by the time the Jets go into San Francisco. So this team is not going to be that good. The defense is going to be fire, but Rodgers mentally, yeah, he's still there. He's still very much ahead of what they have, but he's still not that big of an upgrade of the quarterback play that they've gotten over the past few years. Now, if they're good again, this is a huge miss from my offseason content as well, because I don't think that this team has ever excited me, especially with their coaching staff. I just don't believe in Nathaniel Hackett and Todd Downing to run a cohesive offense, and they're still pretty thin on the offensive side of the ball. You have Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, who are both absolutely phenomenal, but yeah. 4.5 for the Patriots. I'm going over on this one. So the team, they looked lifeless last year, and they still finished one game away from hitting the line. Now, once again, this is another one where you can't just look at last year and be like, well, they finished 4-13 last year. Imagine what they can do with their upgrades with, Mayo and Drake May. And I'm just like, okay, that line of thinking is pretty solid, but at the same time, you did lose Bill Belichick, and there's a lot of uncertainty around this team. But ultimately, I'm just going with the over. Even if this team doesn't hit it by much, even if they only win 5-6 games, they have an unproven offense. And by unproven, I don't mean bad. I mean just inexperienced. Because I really like what they've done over the past couple of years, just building the offensive side of the ball. Now, Bill Belichick, he left it in absolute shambles, but he did leave you with Pop Douglas. But Kendrick Bourne is somebody who had played pretty well at certain points last year. What else? Who did they add this offseason? Jalen Polk and Javon Baker are two guys who I really liked during the draft. So it's just a young offense. It's an inexperienced offense. It reminds me a lot of Green Bay last year, where there might be some growing pains early on, but I believe in what they're building. Now, the defense, it should carry over slightly from the Belichick days. Probably not going to be as good because that's a tall ask, but yeah. And him being a beast could really push this team over the top. I'm not expecting this team to make the playoffs, but I'm not entirely ruling it out either. So with the Philadelphia Eagles, we're going to go with the over here. We're going to go 10-5. And last year, the collapse was all-time humiliating. They started out 10-1, and they finished 11-6, which just isn't good. And they had some ugly losses sprinkled in there too. Like they lost to Dallas late in the year, I'm pretty sure, and they also lost to Arizona. So, yeah, those were both really, really bad. And obviously you had the wild card fiasco. And last year their offensive and defensive coordinators looked absolutely lost. Brian Johnson and Sean Desai, they both got fired, though. So now you have Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. And even if those guys have not been sung praises by fan bases over the past 2 years from where they've came from, they're still going to be an upgrade over what they've had. And I expect this to be more of how we know the Eagles can play. They're going to have a good offensive line. They're going to have a good run game. Their O-line is going to be one of the best in the sport. And they're going to have an arsenal of pass rushers that can just go, go, go and never stop getting tired. That way in the third, fourth quarter, those guys can really start to get after some quarterbacks and make some game-changing plays. And another reason why I think this team is going to be better next year is because of the secondary. Last year, you had Slay and Bradbury, two guys who they needed to improve upon this year because, honestly, I wasn't even sure if those guys were even going to be on the roster in 2025. But Cooper DeJean is now one of your starters in your secondary, same with Quinyon Mitchell. So, yeah, they did fix that, and a Hurts bounce back is something I'll bet on. It's something that I'll look at and I'll just be like, okay, I could definitely see this happening. Now, with the Cowboys at 9.5, we're taking the over. Now, granted, I don't see this team going anything other than 10-7. So this is a really, really, really risky line for me. But this team, it's a good team, but they have some clear issues. There's not much on the offensive side of the ball besides Dak and CD. Obviously, you have Cooks, you have Ferguson, but those guys are Jags at this point in their careers. Worst running back room in the league. So, once again, clear issues on the offensive side of the ball. Offensive line should be better. Like, they've retooled it over the past few years, and they just added Guyton, so there you go. But it's just hard to get excited about McCarthy and Zimmer. Like, this could be a year where McCarthy, everything from his NFL past just catches up to him. Everything from Green Bay, everything from his inability to get it done in Dallas is just like, I don't know. But with Mike Zimmer, I just wasn't a fan of this hire. I thought he really did some of his players dirty to the public, especially towards the end of his time there. Like Kellen Mond, I've never seen a coach hate a player more than Mike Zimmer hated Kellen Mond. And also, Zimmer kind of put Cousins on blast for refusal to get vaccinated. And you can think whatever you want about that, but I really don't like how he ousted his quarterback publicly to the media time and time again. But their opportunity to reverse all the narratives in Dak's likely final year with the team. Like, I don't see Dak getting extended this year because there's two or three guys that are going to be due. 2 of 3 guys are going to be due for big extensions this offseason, and you can only keep 2 of them. So it's Dak, CD, and Parsons, and it makes the most sense to move on from Dak, honestly. But yeah, razor-thin margin for error, but I do think they get this done ultimately. They're just too good at home. So with the Giants, we're going with the under at 6-5. So I feel really uneasy about this one too because they went 6-11 last year, and that was starting Tommy DeVito for a handful of games. But Daniel Jones is just awful, man. Like, this offense has next to nothing besides Neighbors and maybe Wandale too if you want to include that. But Devin Singletary is your RB1. Tyrone Tracy actually could genuinely be exciting. But this is a team, the offensive line hasn't been good for a great many years, even though they've tried to add on to it in free agency. Evan Neal is an absolute joke, and he's going to be on the right side again. He's an absolute turnstile. But the defense could be absolutely disgusting. You have Burns, you have Thibodeau, you have Banks, you have Lawrence, and just a bunch of guys in that unit that I'm just like, okay, this could be fire. Okay, to Nubin. So I'm expecting a lot of good things out of the Giants defense, but this is a team, they're going to lose a lot of games like 16-10. They remind me a lot of the Broncos over the past few years where the offense just wasn't enough to get it done, but you lost games like 20-17. And ultimately, that's just where I think the Giants are headed. But I also describe this team as the new Cleveland Browns because there's just so much that's gone wrong for them since 2017 that I don't see how you can label them as anything other than the new Cleveland Browns. The only team with more losses throughout that time period is the team that shares a stadium with them. And once again, if they're good, it's one of my big misses from my offseason content because I'll just be like, okay, I expected the Giants to be bad. Daniel Jones is just horrible. I had him ranked as the worst starting quarterback in the league, and excluding rookies. And honestly, it's just funny. Yeah. So with the Commanders, we're going to go with the under here. 6.5 is the under. Not really a fan of their coaching hires. I like the Peters hire, and I like the Daniels pick, but like Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury just did not like that at all. And the roster, it has a clear culture vision. It's not designed to be a good team. Like, they're not designed to be good this upcoming year. Why do you think they brought in 35-year-old Austin Eckler? Why do you think they brought in 45-year-old Bobby Wagner? Why do you think they brought in 87-year-old Zach Ertz? It's not because this team is designed by Adam Peters to be a good football team. It's to reset the culture. It's to rebuild what was really a toxic culture from Dan Snyder, and now Josh Harris is taking the team over, and he's willing to spend. I don't really know how he is as an owner. 76ers fans can do that for me, but apparently he's willing to spend, but he's very profit-driven, meaning he wants to make the most profit for the Washington Commanders. And with that, I think he will be smart with investing into the team in general, but Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn, they're just going to set this team back too much. There's just not enough talent on the defensive side of the ball here for Quinn to replicate what he did in Dallas as the defensive coordinator. And Cliff Kingsbury is one of the biggest fake sharps in the NFL. Like, are the Commanders seriously going to run in the air raid? Like, I just don't know if they have the personnel to do that. Now Daniels as a quarterback can definitely do that, but they need like 5 wide receivers who are like 5'8" and 5'9" to run what Kingsbury did in Arizona. But there's just not much about to be optimistic, at least for 2024. They have a bad offensive line. They're going to have a bad defense. This team, I can see it now. I can see a lot of people just being like, is Jaden Daniels a bust? And the answer to that is going to be a resounding no, just like a lot of people with Bryce Young last year. Even though I didn't like what I saw from Young last year. But this team, once again, it's going to be a tough year for them. Like, they're going to finish with a top 3 pick again, and I'm pretty confident in that. Now, with the Packers, we're going to go with the under at 10.5. So, just because I hit the under doesn't mean I don't think this team will be good, but I think 11 wins is a pretty tall ask for an offense that's so young, and there's too many questions about the defense, and the division is very, very tough. With the division, you have the Lions, the Vikings, and the Bears. 3 teams I'm expecting to be pretty good next year, and I actually had every team in this division finishing over 500 when I was going game by game. The only division in the league where I had that happening in, so it's an exciting time to be a Green Bay fan, but we need a bigger sample size on their offense because Matt LaFleur does an incredible job with his units, and he did an incredible job staying patient with his young offense, and you have Jordan Love throwing it to like, I don't know, they are literally 5 or 6 deep as far as pass-catching weapons, and you added Josh Jacobs, you added Marshawn Lloyd. So yeah, once again, I don't think this team won't be good, but I just have too many questions about the defense. Talented unit, don't get me wrong, but how will Hafley be as a defensive coordinator? Like, Joe Barry was an absolute football terrorist, but we'll see how Hafley does as well. So with the Vikings at 7.5, I'm going with the over here. I understand why people are down on this team, and rightfully so, because with the quarterback competition and with the fact that they're going to be either starting Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy heading into 2024, it's just going to be miserable that their quarterback situation looks like that. But ultimately, I don't think we're going to have to wait long for J.J. McCarthy to get onto the field. So Darnold, I think he's going to be a backup at best for the vast majority of this year. But Kevin O'Connell, he always plays against the division extremely tough. Now, granted, there are some games where they just completely roll over and they can't get anything going. But against the Lions, they put up a pretty decent fight last year. And the Lions were obviously the class of the NFC. Didn't really put up a great fight against Green Bay, but I'll excuse them for that one with the Jaron Hall start as well, because that was basically their only option. So, yeah. And the defense could sneakily be one of the best in the NFL. They've added on to it. And Brian Flores, he created that insane blitz that it seemed like a lot of teams just couldn't find a way to stop. But, yeah, I understand why people are very, very down on this team, and rightfully so. But, yeah, ultimately, it comes down to, do you believe in the structure of this team to create something good? And I think it's good enough. And bonus, I think we're going to see J.J. McCarthy week 1. I don't think that Darnold is going to go into the year as the starter. And even if we don't see McCarthy week 1, I think we're going to see him at least week 3, week 4. And then he's never going to surrender the starting position again. So the Bears, 8.5. We're going with the over here. So Eberflus, he's not a good head coach, but this team is absolutely loaded to the point where I just don't see how talent is able to hold them back from hitting that mark. Now, Caleb Williams is now going into one of the best situations for a first overall quarterback that we're probably ever going to see, because he has 3 legit wide receiver ones that he could throw to and target on any given play. good tight ends, strong running back room, and the offensive line, it is kind of a question mark, but it did play well in the second half of last year as well, especially with the right additions and now Jenkins there too, and just a few other guys. So yeah, the defense hopes to continue the momentum post-Sweat trade, and ultimately I think they can. They kind of had a cupcake schedule, so that did contribute to it mostly, but I'm expecting this team to be good. I'm expecting this team to be very good next year, and if Caleb doesn't work out, the Bears can officially say that they're just absolutely cursed and they can never draft a quarterback ever again. So yeah, 7-10 for the Chicago Bears last year. Bodes pretty well for their success this year, I would say, just because it's something to build off of. And yeah, so with the Lions, now we're going 10.5. We're going with the over. So this team now has a first place schedule and a target on their back. So every team now probably has the week they play the Lions circled on their calendar, and especially the teams in the division. But there's stability here. There's stability with what the team was last year, and the team last year was very, very fun. But now you have Ben Johnson staying as the offensive coordinator and Aaron Glenn as your defensive coordinator, even though there was some rumors that both those guys could be leaving for head coaching positions. Ben Johnson, who, he spurned the Commanders and said, "Hey, I don't want to be there," and then there was that whole mudslinging thing. But yeah, I don't know. But the main concern from the last year was the secondary. Now it's fixed, and you invested your top two picks on Terry Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw, so that should be good, and I'm expecting a lot bigger things for the Lions on the secondary as opposed to last year. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that this is just a very strong offensive ecosystem. You have Jared Goff, who has had a resurgent year. You have great skill position weapons, or a resurgent part of his career. You have great skill position weapons in Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, David Montgomery, and ultimately, since they're improving the defensive side of the ball, I think this team is a legit Super Bowl contender, so that's why I'm hitting the over there. So Buccaneers, 7.5. I'm going with the over here. So the team last year, was it exceptionally talented of a group? I honestly don't think so. And Bowles, he is a meh head coach at best. He's better than he was when he was with the Jets because, that's not a high bar to clear. He was legit one of the worst coaches in the league with the Jets. But, coaches can develop and coaches can be like players and get better. But the offense, they'll put up some points. They'll be in some shootouts. Some team is going to go into Tampa and Baker Mayfield's going to drop 4 or 5 touchdowns on them. Mike Evans is going to have a career day. And I do have faith in their defense. Even though it's a young unit and they have lost a lot of veterans on that side of the ball over the past few years. This past year, they did lose Shaq Barrett to retirement. And Levante David, he's not getting any younger, but he's still one of the leaders of that unit, perennially underrated player. So, yeah, this team, they just always find a way to pull it together. I think that's kind of left over from the Brady effect. And, yeah, we'll see how it goes for them this year as well. So, with the Saints, 7.5, we're going with the under here. I just think that asking them to win 8 games is a really tall order. And this team, they went 9-8 last year, but only with a really bad slew of opponents. You obviously had a joke of a division. You had Carolina, who just was not good at all. You had Atlanta, who really, really struggled to utilize their best offensive players. And sure, Tampa did make a run late in the year, and they did win when it mattered most, but they were treading water for most of the year still. And they only went 9-8 despite all that. And now they have legit opponents. Now they play the AFC West this year. Now they play a much more difficult schedule. They have a second-place schedule, I'm pretty sure. And what it boils down to is this defense's core is full of guys that are aging. This team did not add much to it because they legitimately couldn't add much to it. They couldn't add much to it because they're in so much salary cap trouble to the point where their main addition this offseason was Chase Young and Willie Gay, and that was basically it. And the offensive line sucks. Like, without Ramczyk, I've seen this ranked as one of the worst units in the league. From pretty much every article I've looked at, ranking offensive line, and they know a lot more about offensive line play than I do, but you do have some pieces. You do have Fuaga, you do have McCoy, you do have Ruiz, so this offensive line isn't going to be that bad, but Trevor Penning, oh man, I'm just not looking forward to that experiment, but Carr was good in December this past year, but that was only 1 month out of the year, and now he has to learn a new scheme again, so yeah, I think just multiple years of Loomis mismanagement will show on the field. This team, they're just getting too old. They just don't have enough talent. I think it's going to be a tough year for the Saints. 9.5 for the Falcons were also going under here. And this line just feels pretty high for an unproven head coach, GM, and QB. I just don't see them going 10-7 just because I do have concerns about Cousins coming off his Achilles tear. The skill position weapons, I will say, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, they could all dominate if things go well because those are three of the best at their positions in the entire league. So yeah, London is a top 15 receiver. Pitts could be a top 5 tight end, and I do think he still has that monstrous upside just because I look at that guy at Florida and I'm just like, there's no way that his fate in the NFL is, on the track that it's currently on, which is being ruined by Arthur Smith. But I expect it to be a lot better. And Bijan Robinson, one of the top 3 running backs in the sport, indisputably. Like, I have no idea how this guy was not utilized more last year. Even though Algier is a good player, but still, the lion's share should definitely go to Bijan. But the defense, they did play pretty well last year, but they had a cupcake schedule. Like, looking back on it, I was just like, okay. I looked at the Falcons 2023 schedule while I was making their predictions, and I was just like, okay. The defense, they played well last year, but man, who did they play? They didn't play anybody of any legitimacy. So, yeah, there's going to be some regression there. They're going to Raheem Morris as well, who was not really that good of a head coach when he was with Tampa Bay a few years back. And granted, once again, coaches can get better and develop just like players, but yeah. So, yeah, I'm uneasy about this prediction since the rest of the division is not good. I could see Carolina, falling their way upwards into 6 wins. And yeah, ultimately, success this year is not about whether or not they win, but if Bryce Young looks fine. And are you expecting Bryce Young to look fine? I mean, it was impossible for me to get a gauge on him last year because his situation was legitimately so poor to the point where I was just like, okay, he looks bad, but so does the rest of his team. And there were a few games last year where he actually did show why he was the first overall pick, but I'm just not a fan of their skill position weapons besides 2024. Or for 2024 besides Deontay Johnson and Jonathan Brooks. So wheeling Adam Thielen out of the retirement home was not really that great of an idea, and giving him 15 targets a game was not really that good of an idea. Not really a fan of Jonathan Mingo. Just thought it was absolutely ridiculous that the Panthers took him in the early second last year, and they took a Jonathan Mingo clone at the end of the first this year. So yeah, just doesn't bode well for the skill position group. I do really like Jonathan Brooks, but he is coming off the ACL, so unfortunately, we may not see him vehemently. Vehemently, is that a word? Yeah, is that what I was looking for? Really get the lion's share of this backfield until about week 4, week 5. And I'm expecting him to be pretty good, so yeah. But Evero, he can get this defense to perform, but this roster is still reeling from the mismanagement by Fitterer. So NFC West, I am very high on this team's offense because it's going to be Kyler with MHJ McBride, and they had the best run game in the league from week 10 onwards. But winning 8 games is just a big ask from this team. It's still a unit and still an organization that needs time to gel as one, especially now that they have Austin Furt, now they have Gannon, now they have Kyler. So Kyler's the only one really left over from the previous regime, but Gannon, he will make this team a nightmare to play against. Like, they will not go down easily whatsoever. They really, really overperformed last year, especially because a lot of people had them as an 0-17, 1-16 team coming into the league. But yeah, I'm very high on this team's offense because, it's going to be fireworks now that you got Kyler Murray, one of the best wide receiver prospects ever. So yeah, Trey McBride is also a guy who I think we're not really talking about him as a top 10 player in real life. Now, with fantasy, we are. With fantasy, we're just like, oh yeah, he's going to be fire. But I think he probably needs to show that he is at least a full season of staying power before I declare him as like a top 10, not even top 10, but like top 7, 8 tight end in the NFL. But yeah, so let's see where everything goes from here. Once again, winning 8 games is just a big ask from this team, but I think they're building a lot of really special things down in Arizona. And bonus, they had like 16 draft picks, or something ridiculous like that. So 1 or 2 of those guys break out, could add an extra couple wins to this. Once again, the 49ers, this team will annihilate everyone, assuming they're fully healthy, because there was a 3-year stretch last year where they started sputtering, but other than that, they looked very, very good. And obviously, they had that Christmas, sad performance against Baltimore, but other than that, this team played very, very well. And I keep refreshing for Ayuk news, but there's nothing to report. I've had a lot of people in my comment section say, Ayuk's not getting traded, Ayuk's not getting traded. And some people have compared it to like the Deebo Samuel saga that happened a few years ago, and I don't think the news was as bad. Like, yes, Deebo requested a trade, but I didn't ever see Deebo like go on Jaden Daniels TikTok and just be like, they don't want me. They said they don't want me. But yeah, they have a strong team through and through. New defensive coordinator with Nick Sorensen, and it's just going to be a locked and loaded perennial Super Bowl contender, almost perennial 1 seed with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch both there. So with the Rams, 8.5, I'm going with the under. So here's a few things that I am excited for with the Rams. I'm excited for their offensive line. They could have their best run game since 2018, but I am very, very worried about what this team looks like with no Aaron Donald, first of all. And also, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, those guys are kind of on borrowed time. So McVay also seems motivated once again, despite the smoke that he could leave the NFL and despite the smoke that he may have gone into broadcasting. And they have an outside chance to win it all, but they have just too many questions for, that's if everything goes right. If everything goes right, this team could legit be a Super Bowl champion again. But it's going to take a lot to go right, and there are just too many questions. And the NFL is a very volatile league. What was true last year may not be true this year. So, yeah, just too many questions about the Rams here. I don't think they're going to miss this by much. I think I legitimately had them going 8-9 in my thing. And now someone is probably just going to be like, well, you had the Rams going under, so now you have the Seahawks going over. Why is that? And here's why I have that. So the defense last year for the Seattle Seahawks, it imploded way too often in all the big games, like against Detroit, I want to say, and Dallas. Yeah, imploded way, way, way too much. And they did end up winning one of those games anyway, but they hired Mike McDonald to make it better. And honestly, he's going to be a good counter to Shanahan's schemes. He was a good counter to what the Shanahan style offenses wanted to do last year because now I will say the only coach that really I think got the better of the Ravens defense last year from a Shanahan scheme was not Kyle Shanahan, but Sean McVay, because that game ended 37-31 and still needed overtime for the Ravens to beat them. But this offense just has way too much talent to not hit this line, even if their quarterback play is not good. And I'm expecting big things defensively from this team. I'm expecting this team to come out and play very, very well on the defensive side of the ball in particular. And, with back to my point about the offense, you have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, and a few of those guys, yeah, we need to see a little more of, but ultimately, it's just a strong system in place. And yeah, the offensive line does have some questions, but now that Pete Carroll's gone, maybe that was one of the organizational things that stuck with the team. So yeah, and basically that does it for me. So I've gone through every team. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.